So the discussion for today is sexual harassment and the problem that it brings. So sexual harassment is defined as bullying or coercion, mainly sexual coercion, by a person holding a position of power over someone who holds a lesser power in an organization or a business. So there are two types. There's quid pro quo, which is roughly translates to something for something, or hostile work environment, which that's kind of obvious. And the problem with sexual harassment is going to be discussed, specifically sexual harassment inside the workplace. So on the agenda for today, we're going to go over the history of sexual harassment in the workplace. We're going to go over some academic and peer-reviewed sources, relative data on those sources, solutions, and summary of what we have all gone over. So there are four main eras of sexual harassment, as weird as that sounds. We have the antebellum period, where it's kind of before the Civil War and after the Civil War. So many women didn't hold positions of power or any kind of work-related or any kind of job that men held. So there weren't a lot of sexual harassment cases being discussed or reported. So that's it for the antebellum. Before the Civil War, women didn't hold any kind of job of that related to men, but after the Civil War, after slavery was abolished and all of that, women started working in kind of the same places as men, but didn't hold the same kind of power as men. After the Civil War came the Black suffrage movement, where black men and women were fighting for the right to vote in our country and also work in our country at the same level as white people. So as a biology major, I understand there's a science behind sexual harassment. So when someone is assaulted or experiences some kind of sexual trauma, there's scientific proof that the brain changes. The individual kind of packs the trauma away in a box, files it to the back of their head, and closes that box so they can survive the pain. It also does a lot of other things. It can cause physical pain, it can cause baseline elevations and anxiety, and it can also cause post-traumatic stress disorder like that found in returning soldiers. So for example, with the Trump administration, when Judge Kavanaugh was going to possibly be put in the highest position of the United States Supreme Court, Christine Blasey Ford, which was Judge Kavanaugh's victim, was triggered, and that box in the back of her brain opened. And when that box opened, she was brave enough to share it with the world and protect this country, no matter what kind of backlash she got for it. Okay. So for some academic literature, we're going to go over two court cases, the first being the Meritor Savings Bank versus Vinson, and gender roles. So Michelle Vinson was 19 when she was hired as a teller trainee at the Meritor Savings Bank in 1980. It was like 1974-ish, but the court didn't see her case until 1986, 12 years later. So this bank is in Washington, D.C. So for the first 6 months of her career, her supervisor made continuous sexual advances to her. And for the next 3 years, either had sex with her, touched her in public, or forcibly raped her while on the job. She was fired for apparently using too many sick days, but she claimed that she was fired because she denied any more sexual advances from her supervisor. And she claimed that she also had intercourse with him over 3 years for 40 to 50 times. Again, she was touched publicly, either inside or outside of work, and she was raped forcibly many times. She argued that this quid pro quo, something for something harassment, quickly turned into a hostile work environment, and she took it to the court. So the lesser court denied her claims because they just didn't believe her because it took her so long to report it. But she soon got her case on the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled that so the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So the supervisor was fired. she was awarded, what's the money you get?
Compensation?
That's what?
Compensation?
Yeah, but like for something bad. Like something happens to you, you get money.
Liability? I don't know.
You know the word?
I thought it was the compensation.
Now you get workers' comp when you fall.
And this case also made it a lot harder for employers to commit sexual harassment on their employees. So, what I've given here is a number of sexual harassment cases for the past 2 years, so 2016 to 2018. And so there are kind of the quid pro quo and the hostile work environment of female victims. So first we see that a person of higher authority commits a pretty high number of sexual coercion, unwanted sexual contact, and verbal sexual harassment. But in these numbers we see that employees of equal authority tend to portray the most sexual harassment in the workplace, which was very interesting to me, to say the least. And of course, people of lesser authority are less likely to commit sexual harassment in fear of losing their job. So the highest numbers happened, of course, with a person of equal authority, and most often through sexual coercion, so quid pro quo harassment. They wanted something in favor of sexual harassment. And the equal authority and higher authority are kind of equivalent for the unwanted sexual contact, and the verbal harassment was the highest in people of the lesser authority, because so a person of lesser authority was more likely to commit verbal sexual harassment because it was, I guess it was more hearsay rather than saying, oh, he physically attacked me or physically touched me or whatever. So the next thing we're going to discuss is the sexual harassment cases by ethnicity in the past 2 years, for 2016 2018. So, why these numbers are is unclear to many people. I guess it's just kind of like a race thing. This has happened during the Trump administration. We've had a lot of problems with racial tension, so it kind of makes sense that there are more people experiencing quid pro quo and violent workplace in the minority groups, so Black and Hispanic. You guys are the next one. So some solutions for sexual harassment in the workplace are to pass more laws, do more regulations and rules to prevent these from happening. We need to become more educated on proper and professional etiquette, because sometimes we say things without really thinking about the consequences and do things without thinking about the consequences. We can also intervene. If we see something happening like this in our workplace, we can step into it and stop it from even happening so it doesn't become a reported case. We can also go through defense training for someone who might be alone during this time to defend themselves. Okay. So in summary, sexual harassment in the workplace is a problem that occurs every day in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. 75% of reported cases are from female workers, and 25% of those 75% reported cases face unfair treatment. So most of the time they get fired or they get put on probation in their jobs. Workplace sexual harassment can victimize all genders, races, and orientations, even though it's more common for women to be affected and it's more common for Black people to be affected rather than white women, white men, people of the majority. And there are many Supreme Court cases and laws in effect to halt the problem, even though the problem has not completely stopped. You can